Chapter 1. The Royal Beginner. The Alpha King came to close Iona Fenn's illegal wolf school and was enrolled in the beginner class before he finished reading the charge. An 8-year-old girl handed him a smooth brown stone and promised nobody would laugh if his tail came out crooked. Then she pointed to the largest floor cushion and told him it was reserved for students with unusually long legs or unusually large worries. The silence that followed was magnificent. Rain ticked against the old monastery windows. 17 children stared at the king from a circle of faded cushions. 6 had wolf ears showing. 1 had a tail wrapped around his waist like a guilty belt. A small russet wolf sat beside the stove with a slate hanging from her neck. Behind King Valen Rook stood 12 royal guards, 2 clerks, a school inspector, and Master Orsic from the Royal Moon Tower Academy. Every adult looked prepared to witness an arrest. None looked prepared for the breathing stone. Valen examined it in his gloved palm. He was tall enough to make the low beams seem apologetic. Rain gleamed on his black cloak, and a narrow iron crown rested above his dark hair. His gold eyes could stop an argument at 20 paces. The little girl remained unimpressed. "You hold it when your wolf feels shy," she explained. "My name is Posy. My ears come out when I lie, so I don't." 2 russet ears appeared through her brown curls. 1 royal clerk made a strangled noise. Iona entered from the pantry carrying a tray of warm milk. She saw the guards first, then the closure ribbon in Master Orsic's hands. Last of all, she saw the Alpha King occupying her doorway with Posy's stone in his palm. She set down the tray before anyone could knock it over. Practical order mattered during disasters, especially well-dressed disasters. "Your Majesty," she greeted him. "Your aura is under the blue cupboard. 3 children are beneath the table, and Tobin's tail has tied itself around a chair. Kindly stop frightening my furniture." Master Orsic looked delighted. A woman insulting the king would make the closure simpler. Valen's gaze settled on Iona. She wore a plain gray dress, a patched green apron, and ink on 2 fingers. Her black hair had escaped its braid in several determined curls. She was an Omega. The knowledge reached every wolf in the room through scent, quiet as chamomile beneath rain. Yet she had spoken to him as though he were a noisy delivery man. "I am not directing my aura at anyone," Valen informed her. Iona crouched beside the table. Her entire expression changed. "I know, loves," she murmured to the hidden children. "He brought it in by accident. Large alphas shed authority like old carpets shed wool." A nervous giggle came from the shadows. Her voice stayed low and warm. She named the scent of milk, the sound of rain, and the cool flagstones beneath their hands. Within a minute, 3 pale faces appeared. Iona praised each child for looking, not for leaving the hiding place. Then she stood and faced Valen again. The warmth vanished so completely that he almost checked behind her for another woman. "Take 3 slow breaths," she ordered. "Think of something harmless." "I am the Alpha King." Iona waited until his title finished being useless. "That is a title, not a breathing technique." 1 guard studied the ceiling with desperate loyalty. Valen had crossed battlefields without flinching. He had negotiated with furious northern alphas and once faced a charging boar armed with half a spear. He had never been told to think harmless thoughts by an Omega in a patched apron. He breathed. The pressure in the room eased. Tobin's tail loosened from the chair. Posy's ears lowered. The children beneath the table crawled out and returned to their cushions. Iona nodded once. "Better. You may keep the stone until the end of class." "I am not attending class." Posy frowned at the document in his other hand. "Then why did you bring homework?" Laughter moved around the circle. Even the small wolf by the stove opened her mouth in a silent canine grin. Master Orsic stepped forward before royal dignity suffered permanent injury. His academy robe was midnight blue, trimmed with copper moons. His own wolf scent carried cedar, starch, and satisfaction. "Mistress Fenn, this gathering is over. You operate a transformation school without a Royal Moon training charter. By order of the Crown, these premises are closed immediately." He offered Valen the red ribbon. The king took it. Only then did Iona's courage tighten around the edges. She did not step back, but her hand found the corner of the milk tray. 17 children watched her. Iona refused to let them see fear become shame. Before you tie that, she told Valen, you should inspect what you are closing. The complaint describes unlicensed experiments on minors. His voice was calm and hard. It states that you prevent traditional instructors from entering. It also states that one child has remained trapped in wolf form for 3 months. The russet wolf beside the stove sneezed. Iona glanced toward her. Kel would like it recorded that she is not trapped. Kel struck the slate around her neck with one paw. Chalk letters covered it. I am not stuck. People are tiresome. The second clerk read it twice. Valen looked from the slate to Iona. Can she return to human form? Physically, yes. Emotionally, she has reasons not to. 3 months is not an answer. Iona reminded him that 3 months described a duration, not Kel's reasons. Those belonged to the child who was not ready to share them. Master Orsic lifted his chin. He called Iona's defiance proof of danger and insisted that a qualified academy would compel Kel to shift back. Kel moved behind Iona's skirt. Iona's eyes sharpened. A qualified academy already tried. That is why she bites anyone wearing that shade of blue. Master Orsic stepped away from the wolf. Posey whispered that this was sensible. Valen had expected filth, restraints, frightened pupils, and a reckless woman hiding behind sentiment. Instead, the room smelled of soap, wet wool, cinnamon, and old stone, warmed by a careful fire. There were no chains. The window latches were iron. The cups were wood, not silver. Every shelf had rounded corners. Progress charts covered one wall. No child was measured against another. Each name had tiny moons marking voluntary attempts, calm recoveries, and successful stops. The last category unsettled him. At the moon tower, stopping had never counted as success. He crushed the thought before it formed. You may inspect every room, Iona continued. You may read our safety records and speak privately with every guardian, but you will not frighten these children while pretending it is protection. Valen's guards became very still. The Alpha King studied her face. There was no hidden invitation in it. No careful praise waited behind the challenge. She plainly believed he was wrong, and she expected him to improve. It was almost restful. He lowered the closure ribbon. Show me your charter application? Iona turned toward the pantry. Applications. Plural. She returned, pushing a small wooden cart loaded with 3 document boxes. One wheel squealed. The top box bore the date from 5 years earlier. The cart struck Master Orsic's boot. Iona did not apologize. She explained that her first application described an ordinary children's school. The ministry rejected it because ordinary schools could not teach transformation. Her next application described a wolf academy, which admitted only children already able to shift. Valen opened the second box. Her third application called Moonmere a recovery house. That failed because recovery houses could provide treatment but not instruction. The official recommendation merely told her to choose an existing category. You chose none, Master Orsic declared. I chose the children. That silenced even him. Iona produced an old parchment bearing a local seal. It granted the monastery legal status as a child sanctuary. She could house children, feed them, and supervise them with guardian consent. She could not issue recognized training certificates. Valen read every line. He also read the 3 rejection letters. The final one contained a note in an assistant minister's hand. No such school has previously existed. Therefore, no such school is presently required. The logic was so circular it could have chased its own tail. Behind him, Tobin's tail escaped his belt and did exactly that. The boy spun once trying to catch it. His elbow struck a bowl of chalk. Posey ducked. White pieces scattered across the flagstones, and one landed neatly inside Master Orsic's polished boot. Iona did not laugh. Her mouth became a straight line through obvious effort. His gaze moved over the applications, the frightened children, and the red ribbon in his hand. He could not ignore the law. He also could not pretend the law made sense. Valen announced a 7-day stay. The Crown would observe a complete training cycle, inspect records, and interview guardians. No new pupil could enter during that period. As king, he could suspend an enforcement order. He could not create a permanent charter category. That authority belonged to the 9-member Royal Education Council. Master Orsic protested that the school was illegal. "So is a bridge when the law recognizes only roads," Valen replied. "That does not make the river disappear." Iona's brows rose. It was the first sign that he had surprised her. He handed the ribbon to his clerk. Tobin's tail snatched it first. The bright strip flew across the room and landed on the enormous beginner cushion. Posy tied it into a bow before any royal adult recovered. "There," she said. "Now His Majesty knows where to sit." Chapter 2: A Law with No Door. The king sat on the beginner cushion because standing over 17 anxious children produced unreliable evidence. That was his official reason. His unofficial reason was that Posy had planted both hands on her hips and informed him that avoiding the cushion looked like fear. Valen did not fear cushions. The cushion disagreed with his knees. Iona began the morning class as though royal inspections happened every Thursday. She placed 5 objects in the center of the circle: a pine cone, a copper bell, a wool ball, a loaf heel, and a blue feather. She asked each child to choose one visible object, one sound, and one smell. Her voice carried softly beneath the rain. Their wolves shared their bodies, so both halves needed reminders of the present. Valen expected a chant or a command. He expected the concentrated force instructors used to pull a wolf toward the surface. Instead, Posy chose the feather. Tobin chose the loaf and ate it. A solemn 6-year-old named Nall chose the king's crown. "That was not in the circle," Iona reminded him. Nall considered this objection. "It is shinier." Valen removed the crown and set it beside the bell. The children relaxed another degree. Posy's ears emerged first. She touched them, breathed too quickly, and looked toward Iona. The schoolmistress did not praise the ears. She praised Posy for noticing her breath. Then she asked whether Posy wanted to continue. The girl shook her head. "Good stop," Iona told her. She placed a moon-shaped paper mark beside Posy's name. Valen stared at it. She stopped before completing the exercise. Iona's patient face vanished. "An impressive observation. Your education is advancing." 2 guards coughed at once. She explained that forcing past fear taught the wolf to fear the lesson. A child who stopped by choice could return by choice. Control mattered more than spectacle. Master Orsic wrote something severe in his notebook. "The Royal Moon Tower measures complete transformations," he remarked. "Yes," Iona answered. "That is why several of my pupils arrived with perfect scores and night terrors." Kel showed her teeth at his blue robe. The class moved to paired exercises. Each child chose a partner who would name ordinary things during a partial shift. Posy selected Valen before he could object. Her ears appeared, vanished, then appeared again. She squeezed the breathing stone between both palms. "The window is wet," Valen said, following Iona's instructions. "The fire smells of oak. Master Orsic has chalk in his boot." Posy's ears tilted forward. Master Orsic looked down in outrage. "That last fact helped," Posy reported. Valen almost smiled. The sensation felt unfamiliar enough to require investigation. After class, the royal party searched the monastery. They found 7 dormitory rooms, 2 classrooms, a kitchen, an herb garden, and an enclosed moon yard. The outer wall was high enough to contain a frightened young wolf. Its gate opened from both sides without a key. There was also a quiet room lined with straw mattresses. Nothing inside could cut, bind, or trap a child. A copper chime hung by the door so a pupil could summon help. The school used no silver. Even the sewing needles were polished steel, stored in a locked wooden case. Valen tested the fire exits himself. He checked food stores, roof beams, bath temperatures, and well depth. Iona followed with a ledger under one arm and irritation in every step. "Do you inspect every soup pot personally?" she asked. "Only illegal soup." Iona glanced toward the steaming cauldron. I shall warn lunch that the crown is suspicious. The kitchen contained lentil stew, baked apples, and 17 cups labeled with carved symbols. The cups prevented arguments among children who could identify a fox, but not their own written names. Valen lifted one shaped like a crown. That belongs to Nall, Iona warned. He will challenge you. Nall appeared in the doorway, smelled injustice, and challenged him. The king returned the cup. At noon, he interviewed the village physician. Mistress Darren was 70, broad, and apparently immune to royal intimidation. She produced 5 years of monthly health reports. The worst training injury recorded was a bruised bottom after Tobin's tail pulled away his stool. The stool started it, Tobin called from the corridor. His tail flicked in agreement. The physician confirmed that Kel was healthy. The child ate well, slept well, understood speech, and communicated through writing boards. Nothing physical prevented her return. Then why permit this? Valen asked. Darren's lined face softened. The last adults who forced Kel had made human skin feel like punishment. Valen looked through the window. Kel lay in a patch of weak sunlight while Posey read her a badly illustrated adventure book. One page showed a knight riding a wolf backward. Kel appeared critical of the technique. Something old and cold shifted beneath Valen's ribs. He buried it under procedure. The first Guardian interviews began that afternoon. A miller's widow described her son's arrival at the school. Nall had broken furniture whenever an involuntary paw appeared. Traditional teachers had labeled him defiant. Iona discovered he feared losing his hands because his dead father had carved toys with him. She let him transform one finger at a time while holding a wooden horse. He now produced either paw voluntarily. He also used both to steal dumplings. The widow considered this acceptable progress. Another mother arrived with 6 jars of preserves and a complaint that her daughter no longer feared moonrise. She placed the preserves in Iona's pantry, bowed to the king, then asked why he was sitting in Posey's seat. By evening, Valen had heard 9 versions of the same story. The children had been called lazy, broken, stubborn, or weak. Here, their fear was treated as information. Master Orsic argued that gratitude did not establish competence. Neither does blue embroidery, Iona replied. The academy master touched his robe as if personally wounded. Valen dismissed the party for supper. They occupied the refectory's long tables while rain thickened outside. He sat at the head by instinct. Iona moved his bowl to the middle bench. The head seat belongs to whoever serves tonight, she explained. That is me. Every royal guard stopped chewing. His attention shifted from the bowl to her. Do you rearrange all visiting monarchs? Only those blocking the bread. He moved. Supper became an exercise in controlled chaos. Posey asked whether crowns caused headaches. Nall asked whether kings could sentence vegetables. Tobin's tail removed a carrot from Valen's bowl and hid it beneath the bench. Kel sat beside Iona in wolf form. The schoolmistress cut meat into small pieces but did not feed her by hand. Kel could manage for herself, and Iona guarded that dignity fiercely. When a cup fell, a younger child began to shake. Iona was beside him before the echo died. She spoke gently, waited for his eyes, and helped him choose whether to remain or leave. Then she returned to the table and found Valen watching her. What? She asked. You changed. Iona looked down at herself with false concern. I stood up. Your manner changed. Iona tore bread. Frightened children need softness. Powerful adults usually need accuracy. The answer landed without polish. It contained no suggestion that he was wise, handsome, merciful, or destined for greatness. Valen had spent his life among sentences wrapped in silk. Every courtier spoke in layers. Praise might conceal a request. Concern might hide an accusation. Silence could be a threat wearing no shoes. Iona's words arrived barefoot and carrying a hammer. He found that unexpectedly peaceful. That night, the royal party occupied the village inn. Valen took the best room, which meant the roof leaked only near the wardrobe. He opened the day's inspection notes while thunder moved over the valley. Page after page supported the school. Then he reached Posey's exercise chart. Beside the first voluntary appearance of her ears, Iona had written. She stopped before panic and returned smiling. Valen touched his own gloved palm. He remembered a tower room, a locked door, and an instructor telling an 8-year-old prince that kings did not stop. His wolf stirred deep inside him, not toward the surface, away from it. He closed the ledger too quickly. On the table lay Posey's breathing stone. He had forgotten to return it. For several minutes, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom held a child's brown pebble and listened to the rain. Chapter 3: 7 Days of Evidence. By the third morning, King Valen had acquired a schedule, an assigned hook for his cloak, and a written warning against intimidating the porridge. The porridge had not complained. Posey had objected on its behalf. Iona posted the warning beside the kitchen door. The royal clerks examined attendance sheets, while the guards inspected the wall again. Master Orsic observed lessons with the expression of a man being slowly poisoned by cheerful children. Valen watched Tobin's individual session. The 7-year-old stood in the moon yard with his hands pressed over the back of his trousers. His yellow hair stuck up in worried spikes. Whenever Iona asked him to relax, his shoulders climbed closer to his ears. "I don't have a tail," he announced. A tawny tail emerged and knocked over a bucket. Posey's ears appeared in sympathy. Iona remained beside Tobin without touching him. "You don't have to hide it here. Father says it has no discipline." The tail struck the bucket again. "Your father has never met it properly," Iona observed. "At present, it seems to dislike criticism and buckets." Tobin glanced behind him. The tail became still. She asked him to name one thing it might want. Tobin considered food, freedom, and revenge against furniture. He chose freedom because Iona would not approve revenge before breakfast. They practiced letting the tail move without chasing it. Iona turned the exercise into a game of touching colored cloths tied along the wall. Tobin's tail selected green, blue, and Valen's cloak. The king caught the muddy tip before it reached him. "Excellent control," he remarked. Tobin beamed. The tail curled around Valen's wrist. The yard went quiet. Valen's alpha instincts reacted before thought. Power rose under his skin, prepared to remove any restraint. He saw Tobin's smile vanish. Valen forced the power down. Slowly, he opened his hand and allowed the boy's tail to remain. "Does it release guests?" he asked. Tobin whispered that it accepted biscuits. Iona handed the king one from her apron pocket. He negotiated his freedom with half a biscuit and no military casualties. Later, Iona recorded the session. Under Tobin's name, she wrote, "Tail sought contact without shame. Student communicated terms. Visiting king paid reasonable ransom." Valen read over her shoulder, "That sentence will not enter the royal archive." Then stop reading private notes. "I am conducting an inspection." She pointed at the spreading stain beneath his sleeve. "You are dripping on my ink." He moved back. She had won again without appearing to notice the contest. On the 4th day, the school received a letter from Kel's aunt. The woman had raised her since infancy and now lived 2 valleys away. She wrote that the child could remain at the sanctuary until she became human again. The words were careful, tired, and cold around the edges. Iona read the letter alone in the pantry. Valen found her there because she had missed the afternoon records review. She folded the page before turning. Her aunt pays every month, he noted. She has not abandoned the child. "Money can travel where love refuses to go." Valen heard anger beneath her flat tone. "You cannot make a guardian brave. No, I can make sure Kel does not mistake another adult's fear for her own worth." He thought of royal advisors who called every injury a lesson and every loneliness a duty. Nobody had ever separated their failures from his worth. The idea seemed simple when Iona said it. Simple things could arrive 30 years late. That evening, Kel's slate disappeared. The staff searched every classroom. Iona finally found the wolf inside the laundry, lying over a folded green dress. Kel had hidden it behind a basket. Iona settled on the flagstones several feet away. Her voice softened until it barely disturbed the warm smell of soap and linen. "You kept it," she said. "That tells me something. You don't have to tell me the rest tonight." Kel placed one paw on the dress. Valen stood outside the half-open door. Iona knew he was there, but she did not expose the child's private moment. She simply remained until Kel slept. When she emerged, Valen asked why the dress mattered. "It proves she has not rejected being human forever." "You could use it to encourage her." Iona's adult face returned. She observed that he could use his crown as a soup bowl. Possibility did not make the choice wise. He looked at her for a long moment. "You enjoy this. Correcting you? More than is probably respectable." On the fifth day, Master Orsic attempted a formal assessment of Posey. He placed a copper moon disc on a table and ordered her to produce both ears within 10 breaths. At the 6th breath, her hands began shaking. Iona stopped the test. Orsic insisted that discomfort was necessary. Posey needed to learn that fear did not control her. "Fear is already controlling her," Iona replied. "You are merely shouting instructions from the passenger seat." Valen ordered the disc removed. Master Orsic stared at him. "Your Majesty, the crown has used timed tests for 80 years. Then the crown has had 80 years to notice frightened children." Posey's ears rose. She looked at Valen with startled pleasure. He received a moon mark on the progress wall for protecting a stop. The paper moon was pink. He objected to the color. Posey added glitter made from crushed mica. "Now it is royal." By the 7th day, the inspection had found no abuse, no dangerous equipment, and no missing funds. It had found a roof leak above the east dormitory and a goat entering through the kitchen window. The goat belonged to the monastery's groundskeeper and held no educational position. It did, however, eat part of Master Orsic's final report. Iona recovered the pages with only 2 corners missing. She denied encouraging the animal. Her face was entirely innocent, which made Valen suspect careful planning. The royal party assembled in the classroom for his judgment. Rain had finally stopped. Pale sunlight fell over the cushions, the progress wall, and the red ribbon still tied in a bow. Master Orsic recommended immediate closure. The children could return to traditional academies or their guardians. 4 have guardians who will not take them, Iona reminded him. Then they may enter general sanctuaries. Tobin's tail wrapped around Iona's ankle. Valen surveyed the 3 rejected applications, the health reports, and the voluntary progress records. Last, his attention reached the large beginner cushion. Something in him had begun to hate that cushion. Something else wanted to know whether he could sit there without feeling foolish. The school will receive a 6-week provisional review, he decided. Its sanctuary permit remains valid. Training may continue under direct crown observation. The children cheered. Kel barked once. Nall placed his crown cup on his head. Master Orsic went pale. "Who will conduct this observation?" Valen folded the report. "I will." That silenced the adults. Iona did not cheer. Her eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. "You have a kingdom," she reminded him. "It has survived my absence for 7 days." Iona gave the first clerk a questioning look. "Has anyone checked?" The first clerk made another strangled sound. Valen issued instructions before anyone could question him further. The clerks would return to the capital with copies of every record. Master Orsic would collect former student files from the Moon Tower. The guards would establish a post in the village, 2 miles away. No royal officer would enter school grounds without invitation. The king would stay in the old forester's lodge beyond the orchard. Sealed reports would leave every 3rd morning. He called it an independent environmental review. Children behaved differently when surrounded by armed strangers. That explanation was true. It was simply not the entire truth. Iona waited until the royal party left the room. Then she folded her arms. "Why are you really staying?" Valen had faced assassins with easier questions. The crown requires accurate evidence. That answer has polished boots and no feet. Valen refused to examine the strange accuracy of that description. It is nevertheless my answer. She studied him with unsettling attention, not magical attention. There was no gift in her gaze, only intelligence sharpened by years of watching frightened bodies lie. Valen kept his shoulders loose and his hands still. At last, Iona stepped aside. Your beginner cushion will remain available. Burn it. Fear of furniture is common. We can work slowly. He left before she saw him smile. Chapter 4. The Adult Demonstration. King Valen moved into the forester's lodge with 2 shirts, 1 sword, 6 sealed boxes, and no servant to explain why a king needed 6 sealed boxes. The lodge stood beyond the school orchard. It had 1 bedroom, a narrow hearth, and a table scarred by old knives. A family of mice had occupied the flour bin, but Valen considered their claim procedurally weak. He spent his first night answering council reports. At dawn, he carried the boxes to school and announced that the review required an adult demonstration of Iona's method. Iona was repairing a torn cushion. Find an adult volunteer. I volunteer. Her needle stopped. Valen had prepared 4 reasons. Adult instruction would test whether the method depended on childish imagination. It would reveal whether Iona adjusted for physical size. It would also establish the safety of her enclosed yard. He delivered all 4 with a straight face. Iona listened, then tied off the thread. You practiced that speech. I prepare for official discussions. You prepared 4 excuses for sitting on a cushion. She agreed to 1 demonstration after evening lessons. It would occur in the separate moon room, away from the children. Mistress Darren would remain nearby. Valen refused the physician's presence, claiming an observer might affect results. Iona's suspicion deepened, but she allowed the condition. She did not yet know whether he was hiding pride, curiosity, or something dangerous. The moon room had an open roof covered by iron lattice. White light fell across wooden floors rubbed smooth by bare feet and paws. There were no mirrors. Iona believed mirrors made frightened students watch for failure instead of feeling their bodies. Valen removed his crown, cloak, boots, and sword. He kept his gloves. Iona set the brown breathing stone between them. Tell me the first sign your wolf is approaching. Heat in the spine. Iona gestured toward his unchanged hands. Show me. He stared at her. It is not visible on command. Neither is good judgment, apparently. We still hope for evidence. She asked him to feel the floor, notice the night air, and name 3 sounds. He identified an owl, a loose shutter, and Tobin arguing with his tail in the dormitory. Now invite 1 claw, she instructed. Not a hand, not a full shift. 1 claw. Valen knew how to call his wolf. He had done it in mud, blood, fire, and snow. He had transformed while arrows struck the earth beside him. He had torn through armor with his teeth. Moonlight and safety were harder. He reached inward. His heartbeat accelerated. The room narrowed. Old stone replaced smooth wood beneath his feet. He smelled lamp oil from a tower extinguished 26 years ago. No claw appeared. Again, he ordered himself. Iona's manner changed at once. The sharpness left her voice. No, look at me, Valen. Nobody used his name like that. Courtiers wrapped it in titles. Soldiers shouted it across battlefields. Iona offered it as a place to stand. He looked. The floor is warm, she told him. The door is open. You decide what happens next. His lungs refused a full breath. She sat several feet away, lowering herself beneath his line of sight. She did not touch him. She did not command his wolf or tell him to be strong. Choose 1 sound, she continued. The loose shutter knocked twice. That. His voice came rough. Good, choose 1 thing you can see. Valen focused on the absurd brown stone. The tower receded. His heartbeat slowed, leaving sweat cold beneath his shirt. Iona waited until he could breathe normally. Her patience had no pity in it. That mattered more than he understood. Then she stood, picked up the stone, and became unbearable again. Your demonstration is complete. I did not transform. Iona closed the record book with deliberate care. You approached panic, recognized it, and returned without harming yourself. That is a successful stop. It is nothing. Her eyes went hard. Do not use that word in my school. There are no children here. There is a student. His gaze dropped to the cushion before returning to her. You cannot seriously classify me as a student. Iona opened the record book. Adult, difficult, poor listener, promising cheekbones. His head lifted. She scratched out the last two words. That was medically irrelevant. Was it inaccurate? Color touched her cheeks. Class dismissed. Valen returned to the lodge carrying the breathing stone and the first honest failure of his adult life. He slept better than he had in years. The following morning brought the less charming side of a royal investigation. Valen inspected medicine cupboards while Iona counted every bottle after him. His gloves were clean, but she trusted inventories more than kings. The school kept fever herbs, bandages, soap, and bitterroot tonic. Nothing promised to force a transformation. Nothing contained silver. Every bottle carried a date and the name of the adult permitted to use it. In the next room, the clerks compared enrollment forms against letters from former schools. The pattern grew clearer with each file. Moon Tower had not expelled most of these children for being unable to shift. It had expelled them for disrupting lessons with panic. One girl had hidden whenever the practice bell rang. One boy had vomited during timed exercises. Tobin had been marked insolent because his tail knocked tools from an instructor's hands. Kel's old record was shortest. It described a child refusing her human form after discipline and recommended stronger discipline. Valen read that line 3 times. Master Orsic claimed the language reflected standards from a previous headmaster. Iona produced a transfer letter bearing Orsic's own signature. His face lost enough color to match the paper. The king did not accuse him of cruelty without proof. Instead, he ordered copies preserved and requested the names of every instructor who had supervised those sessions. That request turned Orsic's confidence into careful cooperation. During the same morning, Valen observed the practical lesson that followed every difficult moon exercise. Children repaired garden beds, folded blankets, kneaded dough, or brushed mud from boots. Iona believed a frightened body recovered faster when given ordinary work with a visible ending. The king was assigned 6 pairs of muddy boots. He suspected retaliation. Iona called it environmental evidence. Posey demonstrated the correct brush angle. Nall supervised polish with the grave attention of a royal armorer. Tobin's tail stole 1 bootlace, then returned it after receiving a task of its own. Valen had never polished his own boots. This information spread through the class and produced more shock than his title. The first boot emerged streaked. The second looked damp and offended. By the 4th, he understood how much pressure the leather tolerated. By the 6th, Posey granted him competence without enthusiasm. The work gave him a glimpse of Iona's method beyond breathing stones. Children at Moonmere learned that clumsy beginnings did not become permanent identities. A poor loaf could become crumbs for soup. A crooked stitch could be removed. A frightening shift could end, and another attempt could happen later. Valen wrote that observation in his private notebook. He did not include the boots. At noon, the village magistrate arrived with the original complaint. The writer had used a false name, but the wax bore a Moon Tower supply mark. Orsic admitted that his deputy had sent it. The deputy's motives were mixed. 3 families had transferred their children from the academy to Moonmere. Their questions about pain training had begun affecting new enrollment. He feared unregulated care, but he also feared losing fees and authority. That distinction mattered. The complaint had not invented the missing charter or Kel's 3 months as a wolf. It had arranged true facts to produce the ugliest possible meaning. Iona wanted the deputy named in the public report. Valen refused until the man could answer for himself. She disliked the delay, although she accepted the fairness. Later, she found the king beneath the east gutter, measuring its sag with a length of cord. Water had soaked one shoulder of his formal coat. She informed him that inspectors generally stood away from falling water. Valen answered that accurate evidence often lacked manners. Iona gave him an old work coat from the storeroom. It ended several inches above his wrists and strained across his back. The children discovered him wearing it and declared that the crown had grown. He repaired the gutter with a guard's hammer and no royal assistance. Iona watched from the path while pretending to examine drain stones. The complaint had brought him to her gate as an enemy. By afternoon, he had protected the accuser's right to answer, uncovered the academy's conflict, and stood on a ladder in a coat too small for him. She did not trust him yet. She did, however, begin to revise the shape of her suspicion. Chapter 5. His Majesty versus One Claw. The king returned for another demonstration the following night. He explained that one session could not establish reliable findings. Iona charged him 2 hours of roof repair. On the third night, he cited the need for repeated evidence. She made him peel apples for breakfast. By the fifth session, Valen had inspected the moon room's air circulation, floor friction, emergency bell, and emotional effect upon royal knees. He had also repaired 6 roof tiles and learned that Noel ate apple peel in one continuous ribbon. He had not produced a claw. Iona never asked why a warrior famous for battlefield transformations needed beginner exercises. She watched instead. He always chose the place nearest the open door. He kept his gloves on until the last possible moment. When fear rose, his right thumb pressed into the center of his left palm. The gesture was small. It was also deliberate. During the 6th session, she changed the exercise. She gave him a lump of clay and asked him to make the shape of his wolf's paw. Valen looked offended. "I came here to test transformation training. You are testing clay. I command 11 provinces." She pushed the lump toward his side of the table. Then one lump should be manageable. His first paw resembled a cabbage struck by weather. Iona placed it on the shelf beside the children's work. Posey discovered it the next morning and labeled it Royal Potato. Valen attempted a second. That one possessed recognizable toes. As he pressed each claw into shape, his breathing remained even. Iona asked him to remember the movement in his real hand. He closed his eyes. Heat moved through his fingers. One nail darkened, lengthened, then vanished. Valen opened his eyes with naked surprise. Iona smiled before she could stop herself. It changed her entire face. Warmth reached her dark eyes and softened the determined line of her mouth. He forgot the claw. "You did it," she said gently. "You called it without danger." The moon room became quiet. Valen wanted that voice to remain. He wanted to know whether she used it only for frightened things. More dangerously, he wanted to qualify. Then she picked up the clay paw. "The sculpture remains terrible." There she was. He began anticipating her changes. Soft Iona asked what he felt. Ordinary Iona told him his answer was evasive. Soft Iona praised one calm breath. Ordinary Iona refused to let him send a royal carpenter for a crooked shelf. She did not treat him as fragile outside the moon room. Inside it, she did not treat him as invincible. No one had ever offered him both dignities. His reports to the capital became longer. He found new questions that required personal study. Did the sanctuary permit cover garden lessons? Did voluntary stopping improve later control? Could an academy goat be considered staff if it had eaten confidential evidence? His chief minister replied that the kingdom remained stable and asked whether the king had been hit on the head. Valen sealed a response assuring him that no recent injury had occurred. The word recent did considerable work. At school, the children adjusted to his presence. They stopped bowing after Posey discovered he disliked it. Instead, they offered daily reports. Noel reported that 2 socks were missing. Tobin reported that his tail had achieved nothing suspicious. The tail was holding both socks. Kel reported nothing but followed Valen during his morning inspection. Her claws clicked behind him through the corridors. Whenever he turned, she sat and pretended interest in a wall. On the 10th day, Valen found her waiting near the moon room after his private session. She sniffed his bare hand, where the nail had briefly changed. He expected her to expose him through some dramatic canine reaction. Kel yawned. Then she leaned against his leg. Valen remained motionless. The small wolf was warm through his trousers. Her trust had no ceremony, no oath, and no request attached. Iona watched from the doorway. She knows. Knows what? What it is to have people waiting for your body to perform. Valen looked down at Kel. She will not tell anyone? Her handwriting is excellent, but her commitment to gossip is low. He almost asked whether Iona knew too. The question stayed behind his teeth. She did not know the worst of it, not yet. The following afternoon brought Tobin's father. Garin Hale arrived in a fur-lined coat despite mild weather. He smelled of horse leather, expensive soap, and anger prepared before travel. Tobin saw him through the classroom window. His tail vanished so quickly that his trousers sagged. Iona met Garin in the yard. Her posture was straight, her voice controlled, and her patience notably absent. "Your letter said he had improved," Garin began. "He has." The father's gaze moved toward the classroom window. "Then why does the thing still appear?" Inside the classroom, Tobin pressed his back against the wall. Valen felt his own wolf rise, furious and immediate. The man had called part of his son a thing. Iona replied that the goal was control, not removal. Tobin's tail was healthy. It appeared during stress because the boy feared it. "He fears it because it disgraces him," Garin snapped. "Other boys his age complete full shifts." The child's scent changed. Shame turned sharp as burned cloth. Valen crossed the yard before Iona could stop him. "Your son is not a disgrace." He kept his voice low, but alpha power traveled beneath it. Garin stumbled back. Windows rattled. Every adult wolf in the yard lowered their eyes. Inside, a chair scraped. Posey screamed. Valen turned. Tobin had fallen beside the wall, arms over his head. His tail had burst free and wrapped around his throat. Nall was under a table. Posey's ears lay flat against her curls. Kel stood between the children and the door, growling at the king. Iona's face emptied. "Leave the yard." Valen had never heard 4 words contain so little fear. "I was defending him." "You are frightening him. Leave." The command struck harder than defiance. He looked at Tobin and understood that intention could not erase effect. Valen walked out through the gate. He waited beside the orchard wall while Iona restored calm. He heard her name colors, sounds, and scents. He heard Tobin begin to cry. He heard no accusation in her voice, only room for the child to return. The king stood alone beneath an apple tree and wanted a battlefield. Battlefields forgave force. An hour later, Iona found him there. Her apron bore a wet patch where someone had cried against it. "Tobin is safe," she said. Valen nodded. "I will apologize. Not until he chooses to see you." His instincts resisted. A king corrected harm immediately. Delay felt like cowardice. Iona saw the argument in his face. "Your discomfort is not the emergency." Again, the truth arrived without decoration. Valen accepted it. Chapter 6. An Apology with Biscuits. Tobin chose to see the king the next morning. He required Iona, Posey, Kel, 2 biscuits, and a chair that had never offended his tail. Valen entered without his crown. He took a place on the rug because the chair had a complicated history. The boy watched him from behind Iona's arm. "I used my power when I was angry," Valen began. "I meant to protect you. I frightened you instead. That was wrong." He did not mention Garen's cruelty. He did not explain that alpha instinct had moved before thought. Explanations could become disguises when worn too quickly. Tobin's tail appeared and pointed toward the biscuits. Valen pushed the plate closer. "I will ask before using my power here. If I forget, you may remind me." "How?" Tobin whispered. "Use words?" The tail knocked the king's shoulder. Tobin looked thoughtful. "It prefers that." "Then your representative has spoken." The boy smiled. Posey awarded Valen a paper moon for apologizing without blaming furniture. Kel permitted him to scratch behind one ear. Iona said nothing until the children left. Then she placed a cup of tea beside him. "You did well." Her voice was quiet. The praise warmed him more than it should have. Is that your treatment voice? No, that was my honest voice. How can I distinguish them? Iona considered. One is for frightened patients. The other is for irritating kings who occasionally improve. You find me irritating? I assume the evidence was conclusive. Valen carried that exchange through the entire day like a private flame. Tobin's father did not share the school's relief. Garen demanded his son be released from the sanctuary and announced his intention to correct the problem at home. Iona produced the original guardian agreement. It allowed either party to end placement with 2 days' notice. It also required a physician to confirm that removal would not create immediate harm. Mistress Darren refused confirmation. Garen then did something worse than rage. He became cold. He signed a declaration surrendering responsibility for Tobin and stated that he would reconsider when the boy could behave like a proper wolf. The pen scratched across parchment while Tobin waited in the garden, unaware that his father was leaving without him. Iona stared at the signature. Her fingers tightened until the paper trembled. You may regret this, she warned. Garen replied that regret was preferable to ridicule. Valen stepped between them before Iona used the ink bottle as an argument. He did not use alpha power. He simply witnessed the surrender and ordered a copy entered into the district record. When your son thrives, Valen told Garen, this document will remember who failed to recognize him. Garen left. Iona followed him to the gate and shouted that his coat made him resemble an overdressed cupboard. Valen waited until the man disappeared down the road. Was that necessary? No, she admitted. It was medicinal. Telling Tobin required greater care. Iona sat with him under the old pear tree. She explained that his father had made a frightened, harmful choice. She never claimed Garen did not love him. She also never asked Tobin to excuse him. The boy listened without moving. His tail lay flat in the grass. Do I have to leave? He asked. Iona promised he would remain at the school. She would apply for legal guardianship that afternoon. Tobin looked toward Valen, who stood at a respectful distance. Can kings approve mothers? Valen's throat tightened. Iona answered first. Kings can approve paperwork. Mothers require more work. The tail lifted slightly. That evening, Iona filled out 6 guardianship forms at the refectory table. Valen reviewed the law beside her. Sanctuary keepers could become temporary guardians, but permanent adoption required a licensed educational residence or separate household. Her illegal teaching status now threatened the very child the law had failed. I can grant an emergency royal wardship, Valen said. Iona's pen paused. For Tobin? For every child whose guardian withdraws during this review. Under whose name? Valen met her wary gaze. The Crown's. Her expression closed. No. Valen leaned back. You would rather leave him without legal protection? I would rather not turn frightened children into royal property. They would not be property. Iona pushed the old statute across the table. Then do not use a law written for property seized after rebellion. He checked the statute. She was right about its origin. Valen hated discovering flaws in laws bearing his seal. During his reign, he had revised taxes, border courts, and inheritance rules. He had never examined sanctuary guardianship because nobody at court had called it urgent. Urgency, he was learning, often lived far from thrones. Together, they built a temporary solution. Mistress Darren would serve as independent welfare witness. The village magistrate would review the placement every 30 days. Iona would hold daily care authority, while the Crown guaranteed funds without ownership. It was not elegant. It was legal. At midnight, they signed the final page. Iona rubbed her aching hand. Congratulations. You have completed your first useful legal exercise. I have governed for 12 years. Practice explains the improvement. He laughed. The sound startled both of them. It came low and rough, as though it had spent years locked in an unused room. Iona stared. Valen's smile faded. What? Nothing. She gathered the papers too quickly. I expected a more royal noise. Trumpets? Iona pretended to consider the possibility. Possibly a decree. He looked at her across the candlelit table. The room smelled of ink, cooling tea, and rain beginning beyond the shutters. I can issue one, he offered. I hereby command you to make me laugh again. Denied. The office is closed. He went back to the lodge, smiling anyway. Chapter 7. The Knife in the Moon Room. Valen's progress stopped after the incident with Tobin. Each night, he entered the moon room and failed to call even one claw. The moment he reached inward, he remembered the children cowering from his power. Shame joined the older fear, and his wolf withdrew farther. Iona reduced the exercises. He shaped clay, walked barefoot across different textures, and listened to the copper chime. She never demanded a transformation. Her patience began to feel unbearable. On the fourth failed night, Valen left before dismissal. He returned after the school slept. Moonlight filled the empty room. He locked the outer door, removed his glove, and placed a narrow knife beside the breathing stone. He had carried the blade for 26 years. The handle was ironwood. The edge was steel. No silver touched it. One shallow cut would be enough. Pain opened the path. Pain always opened it. Valen pressed the edge against his palm. If you bleed on my floor, you will scrub it. Iona stood beneath the archway in her night robe and boots. Her braid hung over one shoulder. She looked sleepy, furious, and entirely unsurprised. Valen lowered the knife. You should be asleep. You should be less obvious. Kel scratched my door until I followed her. The russet wolf sat behind Iona, pleased with her betrayal. Valen's face hardened. Leave. No, that was not a request. Iona continued across the room without slowing. Then it was poorly designed. Iona crossed the room and held out her hand. He did not surrender the knife. Her voice changed. Valen, look at me. Softness touched his name. His grip loosened despite himself. She did not snatch the weapon. She waited until he placed it in her palm. Then she set it beyond reach and lowered herself nearby. How long? She asked. He could have lied. Every habit of kingship urged him to provide a controlled fraction of truth. Iona waited without filling the silence. Since my first shift, he answered. The words felt like removing armor in winter. He told her about the moon tower. At 8, he had failed to transform during the royal ceremony. His father dismissed the servants and locked him with an instructor until dawn. The man used alpha pressure. When that failed, he used hunger, cold, and a copper rod. The rod did not contain silver. It did not need to. Before the third dawn, Valen found a broken tile and cut his own arm. His wolf surged forward to defend him. Everyone called the transformation a triumph. After that, pain became the only door his body trusted. He concealed it through war, private rituals, and partial shifts. No physician knew. No minister guessed. His father died believing the training had succeeded. Iona's face remained calm, but her hands curled in her lap. You came here because of the complaint, she said. The report described children who could transform only through fear or danger. Understanding settled painfully across Iona's face. And you recognized yourself. Valen raised his eyes toward the open roof. I recognized a weakness that should not exist. Iona moved then. She stopped an arm's length away, close enough to reach but not touching him. It exists because someone hurt a child, she told him. That is not the same thing as weakness. His throat tightened. Do not soften this because I am your king. Her eyebrows rose. I am softening it because you were 8. Your crown had nothing to do with it. For one reckless moment, Valen wanted to lean into her. He wanted the hand she offered frightened children against his hair. The desire shamed him more than the confession. Iona seemed to understand something. She opened her palm between them. He placed his uninjured hand in hers. Her skin was warm and roughened by work. She did not squeeze. She simply gave him a point of contact while the old room dissolved around them. The floor is warm, she murmured. The door is open. The knife is across the room. You are 34, and nobody here wants a performance. Valen breathed until his wolf stopped running. When he could speak, he asked whether she would keep the secret. Iona released his hand. Her practical expression returned, though her eyes remained kind. I will keep it because you are my patient, not because you wear an expensive metal hat. It is an iron crown. Iona remained unmoved by the correction. It still looks uncomfortable. That is your response to the most dangerous secret in the kingdom? She lifted his confiscated knife between two fingers. No. My response is that you will give me the knife before every session. Valen stared at her. Also, she added, we are changing your treatment plan. You cannot issue orders to the crown. Iona picked up the knife. Watch me. Kel sneezed in apparent approval. Chapter 8, 2 new residents and 1 bad bedtime story. Kel's aunt arrived 3 days later with a trunk and no intention of staying for lunch. The trunk contained the child's clothes, 3 books, a hair ribbon, and a wooden fox missing 1 leg. The aunt placed it inside the gate while Kel watched from a classroom window. Iona met the woman beneath a gray sky. Valen remained inside but heard every word through the open window. The aunt explained that neighbors had begun asking questions. Her future husband would not accept a child who slept as an animal. She had paid for 3 months and believed that fulfilled her duty. Iona's anger became very still. Kel is not an animal. Then let her prove it. Behind the glass, Kel stepped backward. Valen moved beside her, blocking her view of the gate. Posey took the other side and held up the badly illustrated adventure book. The knight was still riding backward. Outside, Iona refused to beg. She explained the legal surrender process and made the aunt state her decision before the village magistrate. Every word was recorded. Shame belonged to the adult who left, not the child who stayed. When the wagon departed, Iona carried the trunk inside herself. Kel sniffed it once and walked away. Iona did not follow. She placed the trunk in the school laundry beside the hidden green dress. Then she filed a second guardianship request. That night, Kel refused supper and hid beneath Valen's beginner cushion. The cushion developed a growl. Valen discovered her while attempting to move it for his session. He crouched and lifted one corner. 2 amber eyes stared back. I have been informed that this is my assigned seat. Kel pulled the cushion lower. Your claim may be stronger, he conceded. He sat beside it instead. Minutes passed. The corridor smelled of beeswax, stew, and damp stone. Somewhere upstairs, Tobin blamed his tail for a missing pillow. Kel's nose appeared. Valen told her nothing about abandonment. He described the 6 council letters waiting at his lodge. One minister had used 4 paragraphs to say he disliked change. Another had praised Valen's wisdom before suggesting the opposite of everything Valen proposed. Adults hide simple thoughts inside long sentences, he observed. It is exhausting. Kel crawled out and rested her head on his thigh. Iona found them there. She leaned against the doorway, watching the feared Alpha King sit on cold stone beside an occupied cushion. She missed supper, Iona said. So did I. Her eyes moved toward the 2 empty bowls beside him. You ate 2 bowls. I missed the emotional purpose of supper. Iona's mouth twitched. She brought 2 small plates and sat across from them. Kel eventually ate. Valen ate again for solidarity. The new guardianships changed the school's routine. Tobin and Kel no longer left on rest days. Iona had always lived in the monastery, but permanent care meant night terrors, early breakfasts, mending, bathing, and arguments about socks. Valen began helping without announcing it. He repaired Kel's wooden fox using a carved peg. He installed a lower latch on the pantry after discovering that wolf paws could open the old one. The next morning, Kel opened the improved latch in 12 seconds. Valen redesigned it. She opened that version in 8. Their contest lasted 4 days and ended when Iona moved the cheese. Tobin needed a protective wrap for his tail during sleep. Valen measured carefully and produced a padded leather guard large enough for a military ram. The boy climbed inside it. Posey declared it a boat. Nall supplied a spoon for an oar. The 3 crossed half the classroom before the guard rolled sideways and deposited them under a table. Iona found Valen examining his design with grave disappointment. The stitching is excellent, she said gently. He glanced at her. Treatment voice? Yes. The object is frightened and confused. He narrowed his eyes. You are enjoying my education. Immensely. At bedtime, Valen discovered that children did not respect political rank, military victories, or narrative structure. Posey interrupted every story to correct tactical errors. Tobin's tale turned pages too early. Kel sat on the ending. Valen chose a traditional tale about the first Alpha King defeating a moon beast. Iona stopped him after the beast lost its third limb. Nobody needs that before sleep. It is a classic. Iona removed the book from his hands. It is 7 chapters of poor conflict resolution. She replaced it with a story about a baker who accidentally married a river spirit. Valen considered the tax implications unrealistic. Posey threw a pillow at him. By the end, all 4 children were asleep. Kel lay across Valen's boots. Tobin's tail had curled around Iona's wrist. Firelight warmed her cheek while she watched them breathe. Valen sat across from her on the floor. The room was untidy, inconvenient, and honest. Nobody expected a decree. Nobody had asked him to decide which sentence was flattery and which was bait. He realized he had not felt alone all evening. That knowledge frightened him more quietly than the moon room. Iona caught him looking at her. What? I was considering the tax implications of marrying a river spirit. Naturally. Valen maintained an expression of grave responsibility. The baker should consult the crown. The baker should consult a better king. Valen smiled. Iona smiled back before remembering she meant to be difficult. Neither of them looked away quickly enough. The next rest day tested that fragile warmth. Moonmere opened its yard to guardians twice each month. Families brought mended clothes, favorite foods, and news from home. The visits also allowed Iona to observe whether progress survived outside lessons. Valen intended to remain at the lodge. His presence changed family behavior, and independent evidence remained his favorite excuse for avoiding crowded feelings. Posey overturned that plan by delivering a written duty list. The king had been assigned the welcome table because his handwriting was clear and his face discouraged strangers from stealing registration ribbons. He reported at 9. The yard soon filled with carts, damp cloaks, bread baskets, and nervous affection. Some guardians hugged too tightly. Others stood back, afraid of triggering the very changes they had come to celebrate. Iona moved among them without rest. With children, her patience seemed endless. She helped Fen show his mother his changed teeth, then waited while both cried over an undamaged spoon. With adults, patience became precise instruction. She stopped one father from promising a reward only for a full shift. She corrected a grandmother who called partial fur unfortunate. She removed a copper whistle from an uncle who planned to encourage speed. Valen watched 3 adults obey her before realizing none had noticed she was an Omega. Competence had made hierarchy irrelevant inside the gate. Not every visit went well. A merchant arrived for his 11-year-old daughter, saw fur along the girl's arms, and asked why the school had made her worse. The girl immediately pulled down her sleeves. Iona did not soothe the father. She asked the child what the fur meant. The girl explained that she could now call it while singing and release it before the song ended. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. The father listened because the question had gone to her, not him. Valen offered no command. He carried a bench closer and allowed the family to sit. That small choice pleased Iona more than any royal defense could have done. By the end of the visit, the father asked to learn the song. He sang terribly. His daughter laughed so hard that fur covered both arms, then vanished without fear. The day also revealed the empty spaces around Tobin and Kel. Other children ran toward arriving wagons. They found tasks. Tobin organized ribbons nobody needed. Kel remained in wolf form and patrolled the bread table with professional focus. Valen joined them without naming the reason. He promoted Tobin to chief ribbon officer and appointed Kel inspector of meat pies. Both positions lacked legal basis but carried immediate purpose. Kel inspected 4 pies. Iona found the three of them beneath the pear tree after lunch. Valen had ribbon tied around one wrist. Kel had gravy on her nose. Tobin was explaining that royal appointments required biscuits. For a moment, Iona imagined this as an ordinary sight. The thought came with such sweetness that she nearly rejected it. Ordinary things were dangerous when a person had lived without them. That evening, after the final wagon left, Valen helped stack benches. He asked how Iona had learned to manage frightened families as well as children. She did not offer the answer easily. Her history lived in the records, but facts and reasons were different possessions. At last, she described her own first shift. Iona had been 11, older than every child in her village class. Her ears appeared at 6. Nothing else followed for 5 years. Adults called her stubborn because they preferred blame to uncertainty. Her mother remained patient but died during Iona's 10th winter. Afterward, an aunt placed her at Moon Tower under a charity position. The academy attempted to force progress through public comparison. Iona learned to smile while afraid. She became excellent at predicting instructors' moods. She also learned that a child could obey every command while moving farther from her wolf. Her first full shift happened in a bakery storeroom. She had hidden there after failing another test. No teacher watched. A warm loaf rested beside her. Rain sounded on the roof, and a baker's sleepy old dog leaned against her leg. Safety accomplished what humiliation had not. Years later, Moon Tower hired her as a junior assistant because she understood delayed shifting. The work lasted until she stopped an instructor from using alpha pressure on a vomiting child. The academy dismissed her for insubordination. She left with 2 months' wages, 3 borrowed training manuals, and a promise never to confuse obedience with healing. Valen absorbed the story while carrying the last bench. Iona expected admiration or pity. He gave her neither. He observed that she had built an institution from an act of insubordination and 2 months' wages. The summary was so accurate that she laughed. He then asked whether the manuals had truly been borrowed. Iona replied that Moon Tower could request their return after apologizing to every frightened child. Valen decided the matter required no royal investigation. The rest day ended with 17 pupils asleep, 6 families newly instructed, and 1 king wearing a forgotten green ribbon around his wrist. He noticed it only after reaching the lodge. He left it there until morning. Chapter 9. The Wrong Kind of Help. The next week began with excellent news and an unfortunate trumpet. The excellent news was that Posey wanted to attempt a full shift. The trumpet announced Master Orsick's return with a royal education observer. He had brought Lady Sabra Venn, deputy minister for licensed instruction. Her traveling coat was neat, her questions were precise, and her smile suggested she had never misplaced anything emotional. Valen received them at the gate. "Your independent review appears crowded," Iona murmured beside him. "I did not invite them." She inspected his upright posture. "Try looking less kingly. It attracts officials." Lady Sabra bowed. She had reviewed the first 7 days of records and found them unusually complete. However, the council required standardized evidence before considering a new charter category. She proposed 1 public demonstration. Iona refused before the woman finished. Master Orsick reminded her that children at licensed academies performed timed shifts before observers. A school unable to produce measurable results could not receive public recognition. "My pupils are measurable," Iona replied. "They are not performing bears." Lady Sabra did not take offense. She asked whether any child had already volunteered for a complete transformation. Everyone looked toward Posey. Her ears appeared. The girl had planned to try before Iona, the other pupils, and perhaps the goat. Now a deputy minister waited with forms. Master Orsick had brought a timing glass. 2 unfamiliar guards stood near the gate. Posey swallowed. "I can do it." Iona crouched until they were eye to eye. Her voice became gentle. "You can choose to try. You can also choose a different day." The child's gaze slid toward the adults. "Will they close the school if I don't?" That question ended the discussion. Iona stood. "There will be no demonstration." Lady Sabra warned that refusal would appear in the official record. Write clearly, Iona advised. Use the sentence where a child believed 17 homes depended on her ears. Valen backed the decision. He ordered the timing glass removed and offered Lady Sabra unrestricted access to written records instead. Master Orsik's restraint broke. Your Majesty has ceased observing this woman. You now obey her. The yard grew silent. Valen felt every eye turn toward him. When he first arrived, he might have answered with enough power to shake leaves from the trees. He glanced through the classroom window. Tobin watched him. She possesses greater experience in this matter, Valen replied. Following competence is not obedience, it is governance. Tobin's tail rose behind the glass like a small flag. Lady Sabra accepted the records. She also requested permission to remain for 2 days and observe ordinary classes without formal testing. Iona agreed, provided she surrendered the trumpet. The instrument belonged to the guards, but Sabra surrendered it anyway. Master Orsik did not improve with observation. He saw children laughing during lessons and called the atmosphere undisciplined. He objected when Null paused a paw exercise to sneeze. He considered Tobin's colored cloth game insufficiently serious. Tobin's tail removed the timing glass from Orsik's bag and buried it in the herb garden. Nobody witnessed the act except the king. Valen discovered that discretion could serve justice. Lady Sabra proved more complicated. She questioned every safety rule, but she also listened. During a lesson, a 5-year-old boy named Fen produced wolf teeth for the first time. He startled himself, bit a wooden spoon, and could not release it. Iona did not pull. She sat beside him and asked whether the spoon tasted expensive. Fen tried to laugh. His jaw relaxed. The spoon fell. The entire class celebrated the release, not the teeth. Sabra wrote for several minutes. That afternoon, she asked Iona why humor helped. Fear makes every mistake feel final, Iona explained. Laughter gives the body another ending. Valen heard the answer from the doorway. It followed him into the moon room that night. He and Iona stood beneath a clear sky. She had replaced the breathing stone with his clay paw. The object remained offensively vegetable-shaped. 1 claw, she said. He reached inward. Fear rose, but it no longer arrived alone. He remembered Tobin's tail stealing the timing glass. He remembered Fen biting a spoon. He remembered Iona calling his crown an expensive metal hat. His thumbnail darkened and lengthened. Pain flashed in his palm, although no wound existed. Valen recoiled. The claw vanished. Iona stepped closer. Stay with me. He fought the old instinct to search for danger. I failed. You produced a claw. For 1 breath. Her delight refused to accept his disappointment. An entire breath? We may need a parade. He laughed despite the sweat at his temples. The imagined pain faded. Iona looked at him with open delight. That expression did not belong to a schoolmistress calming any frightened creature. It held something personal, something she seemed startled to feel. Valen's claw returned. It remained for 3 breaths. He released it by choice. Iona placed a gold paper moon beside his name. Valen studied her fingers. Does every adult student receive gold? No. Difficult ones require visible encouragement. And promising cheekbones? She nearly dropped the glue. The king left with his first natural claw and an answer he had not expected. Chapter 10. 17 Small Revolutions. Progress did not arrive like sunrise. It arrived like children entering a kitchen, one noisy piece at a time. Fen learned to release his wolf teeth before damaging spoons. Nal transformed both hands and carved a crooked horse for his mother. A shy 12-year-old produced fur along her arms while singing because silence had always made her anticipate commands. Every 3 or 4 days, another small change altered the school. Valen recorded them in his reports without names. He wrote about methods, safeguards, and outcomes. He did not mention his own gold moon. Posey chose a new date for her full shift. This time, she selected the guests herself. Iona, Tobin, Kel, and Valen entered the moon yard. Everyone else waited indoors. Posey wore a loose linen shift and carried her breathing stone. Her wolf ears had already appeared. "What if I cannot come back?" she asked. Iona sat on the grass. "Then we help you from wherever you are." "What if my tail is ugly?" Valen reminded Posey that Tobin had established legal independence for tails. Any complaint about appearance would therefore need to be directed to her own. Tobin nodded solemnly. Posey laughed. The sound loosened something inside her. Fur spread along her arms. Her shape folded smaller, not violently, but with the awkwardness of a child climbing through a coat. A young brown wolf landed on 4 paws. Her ears were enormous. They turned toward every sound in the yard, gathering bird calls, breath, and the distant goat protesting a fence. Posey stared at her own paws. Nobody cheered. Iona had warned them that noise might overwhelm her. Valen lowered himself to one knee. He placed the breathing stone on the grass. Posey sniffed it. Then she sneezed so forcefully that she sat down. Tobin failed to contain his laughter. Posey's wolf mouth opened in a grin. She remained for 5 minutes. When she chose to return, panic flickered. Iona named the grass beneath her paws and the smell of baked apples from the kitchen. Posey returned human with both arms around the stone. Her first question was whether her ears had looked regal. Valen informed her that they had heard 3 provinces. She received 7 paper moons, 1 for each voluntary step. She gave one to him because he had not shouted. That afternoon, Tobin's father sent a letter. Garin had heard about the provisional review and offered to reclaim his son if the tail was cured before winter. Tobin read the message twice. Then he placed it on the table and asked Iona whether she still wanted to be his mother. Iona knelt before him. Her eyes shone, but her voice remained steady. "Every day, even on days when your tail steals my keys." The tail dropped her keys into a flower pot. Tobin threw his arms around her. Valen turned toward the window to offer privacy. The glass showed his reflection instead. He looked like a man standing outside a life he had begun to want. Later, he found Iona scrubbing the flower pot at the pump. "The guardianship hearing is in 9 days," he said. "Lady Sabra's report supports you. That is useful." Valen studied her determined lack of celebration. "You could sound pleased." Iona would allow herself to be pleased when abandoned children no longer needed a king to invent a legal bridge. "You dislike needing my help." "I dislike help that arrives with ownership." The answer struck near his private plan. He had already drafted a royal charter naming the school a protected crown institution. It would solve every immediate problem. It would also place Iona's work beneath his authority. He put the plan away. Valen asked what acceptable help would look like. Iona glanced at him, surprised by the question. He should ask what was needed, believe the answer, and avoid offense when the answer proved less majestic than expected. "That sounds difficult. You have promising cheekbones. Perhaps they will compensate." Valen took the wet keys from her. Their fingers touched. Her breath caught, almost too softly to hear. "That note was medically irrelevant," he reminded her. "It was also destroyed." His smile grew almost predatory. "I have an excellent memory. A tragedy for us both." He carried the keys inside. She watched him go and wondered when the king's shoulders had stopped looking like a warning. The guardianship hearing took place in the village hall. The magistrate reviewed Iona's finances, living quarters, health records, and proposed care plan. Master Orsic submitted a written objection based on the school's unlicensed status. Lady Sabra submitted a response stating that the status resulted from absent law, not failed standards. The magistrate granted 1-year guardianship of Tobin and Kell, subject to regular review. Permanent adoption could proceed after the school received formal recognition. Tobin celebrated by transforming his tail on purpose. It appeared slowly, stayed still, and curled around Iona's waist. Then it reached for the magistrate's wig. Tobin stopped it himself. The room applauded. The magistrate held his wig with both hands. Valen placed a moon mark on Tobin's chart that evening. "For control." Tobin shook his head. "For not taking the wig." that is control. No, that is sacrifice. The king accepted the correction. Lady Sabra's 2-day observation produced a new problem. Moonmere could prove that its present pupils were safe, but the school had no written training course for future teachers. Iona had carried the method in her habits. She changed exercises by watching each child, then recorded outcomes afterward. That worked while she supervised everything. It could not support another center 50 miles away. Sabra asked for a manual. Iona hated manuals. She believed frightened children rarely followed chapters. Valen pointed out that untrained adults followed confidence, which was worse. A manual could define what nobody was allowed to do, even when it could not prescribe every useful choice. They spent 4 evenings drafting one. The work revealed a new difference between them. Valen thought in systems. He wanted entry standards, review dates, appeal routes, and consequences. Iona thought in moments. She wanted teachers to notice clenched hands, shallow breaths, fixed smiles, and children who became unusually helpful before panic. Neither approach was sufficient alone. Their first draft filled 90 pages and helped nobody. Valen's section on institutional responsibility contained a sentence long enough to require provisions. Iona drew an angry line through it. Her section on listening began with the instruction not to behave like a fool. Valen requested a definition suitable for law. They replaced it with 5 questions an instructor must answer before training. Did the child choose to begin? Could the child stop without punishment? Was the room physically safe? Did the adult understand the child's fear? Would the exercise still matter if no full shift occurred? The manual prohibited silver, restraints, pain triggers, timed public performance, and alpha pressure. It required every school to keep an open exit and a quiet recovery room. Valen added a complaint process children could use without a guardian. Iona added symbols for pupils who could not yet read. Posey designed the symbol for unsafe teaching as a blue boot stepping into porridge. Master Orsic objected to its color. The children tested the manual by giving it to Mistress Darren, the groundskeeper, and one bewildered baker. Each adult had to find the emergency steps within 1 minute. The physician succeeded. The groundskeeper reached the correct page after turning the book upside down. The baker found a recipe someone had drawn in the margin. Valen reorganized the sections. Iona added colored tabs. Tobin's tale removed 3 tabs and forced a second test. The final version fit into 32 pages. Sabra approved it as a foundation, not a finished doctrine. That distinction mattered to Iona. Rules would protect children, but teachers could still treat them as people rather than procedures. The manual also changed Valen's private training. He recognized himself in the requirement for an open exit. He saw how carefully Iona asked permission before approaching him. Her kindness had structure beneath it. She was not guessing, and she was not rescuing him through affection. That understanding steadied his attraction. Gratitude existed between them, but it did not explain everything. He admired the mind that had turned childhood fear into safeguards for strangers. The same week, a new application arrived. A 10-year-old from the Eastern Hills had stopped shifting after being trapped during a barn fire. His mother had heard about Moonmere and begged for a place. Valen's provisional order forbade new pupils. Iona placed the unopened acceptance form beside his breakfast bowl. She did not ask him to break his own order. That would have been easier. They reviewed the child's physician letter, current housing, and immediate risk. He remained safe with family, but had no local instructor willing to teach without fire exposure. Valen amended the order through a documented exception process. Moonmere could offer remote guidance to the mother and reserve the next residential place. The decision protected the review while helping a child beyond the gate. Iona sent a package containing a breathing stone, picture cards, and 3 exercises that required no transformation. The king added money for postage without placing his name on it. 2 weeks later, the mother reported that her son had slept through a storm without dreaming of smoke. No wolf ears had appeared. No paw had changed. Iona placed a moon beside his name anyway. Valen understood why. Chapter 11. The Man Behind the Crown. As the fourth week ended, Valen's ministers became inventive about summoning him home. One letter warned that two counselors disagreed about bridge paint. Another reported a dispute over the number of candles permitted at public funerals. His chief minister finally wrote, "The kingdom is functioning. This appears to worry everyone." Valen sent decisions at dawn and attended school by breakfast. He no longer wore the crown during lessons. Nal had borrowed it twice for educational purposes and once to collect plums. The king stored it on a high shelf. Kel learned to reach the shelf. Iona found the wolf trotting through the corridor with the iron crown around her neck. Valen followed, maintaining the calm expression of a man not chasing his own authority. "Should I help?" Iona asked. "This is a constitutional matter." Kel entered the dormitory. Tobin blocked one exit. Posey offered cheese at the other. Nal prepared to negotiate on behalf of the crown. Valen recovered it after 12 minutes and half a biscuit. "You negotiate well under pressure," Iona observed. "My opponents were divided." She nodded toward the crumbs beneath the bed. "Kel wanted cheese. The others wanted to see you crawl beneath a bed. A common political alliance." Their laughter met in the corridor. Attraction no longer appeared only in accidents. It occupied ordinary moments, then stayed to watch. Valen noticed how Iona tucked loose hair behind one ear when concentrating. He knew which cupboard she kicked when the hinge stuck. He learned that she drank tea cold because a child always needed something before she finished it. Iona learned that he counted windows in unfamiliar rooms. She noticed that he stood between every child and the gate when strangers arrived. He repaired toys with greater skill than tail guards and hated turnips with unreasonable restraint. Neither named the growing tenderness. The treatment made silence more complicated. Valen could now call claws on 3 fingers. He could let his eyes turn gold without searching for danger. Fur had appeared along one wrist during the previous session. Each success brought his wolf closer. Each also brought memories from the tower. One night, the smell of lamp oil from Iona's lantern triggered him. He knocked it over while stepping back. The flame died against the stone rim, but his body had already returned to childhood. Valen reached for the knife he no longer carried. His empty hand closed on air. Iona spoke softly from across the room. "The door is open." He could not see it. "I need pain," the confession tore out of him. "You learned pain," she replied. "Need is a different thing." He shook his head. Heat split along his bones, beginning a shift that could not decide whether to advance or retreat. Iona asked permission before approaching. Valen managed a nod. She placed one hand against his chest and the other between his shoulder blades. Her touch was firm, not restraining. He felt her breath beneath his palm when she guided his hand to her ribs. "Follow mine." For several moments, he could do nothing but hold on. The panic eased. His right hand transformed completely, claws curving harmlessly beside her waist. Valen stared at them. Iona did not retreat. "Can you choose to keep them?" He held the shape for 5 breaths. "Can you choose to release them?" The claws shortened. Human fingers returned against her dress. They remained too close. Iona's hand still rested over his heart. Valen could smell lavender soap, extinguished oil, and the clean night air above them. Her treatment voice had gone silent. The woman looking at him was not merely patient. She was frightened for a different reason. Valen wanted to kiss her. He stepped back instead. "We must discuss the review," he said. Iona blinked. "Now?" "Not now." "Excellent discussion." He picked up the fallen lantern. His hands were steady. His thoughts were not. The next morning, he requested a formal meeting in the garden. Iona arrived with 2 ledgers and an expression ready for bad news. Valen informed her that the direct royal review would end in 3 days. Lady Sabra would continue the legal evaluation from the capital. The school would retain its provisional protection until the hearing. Iona searched his face. "Why?" "Because I can no longer claim to be an impartial inspector." Her grip shifted on the ledgers. He continued before courage became ceremony. "I care whether your roof leaks. I care whether you drink your tea while it is warm. I care when you smile at me differently from the children." Iona opened her mouth. Valen raised one hand. I am not finished, and this is difficult enough without your assistance. My assistance is usually excellent. That is part of the problem. The corner of her mouth lifted. Valen told her that his treatment would also pause. He would not use the secrecy of the moon room to press affection upon the woman responsible for his care. After the review ended, she could decide whether she wanted anything personal from him. Iona looked down at the ledgers. You have thought about this. Constantly. It has been inconvenient. Good. Valen stared at her. Good? She met his gaze. I have also been inconvenienced. Hope moved through him with greater force than any alpha command. They agreed to wait 3 days. Those became the longest days of Valen's reign. Chapter 12, A Kiss Without Medical Purpose. On the first day, Iona avoided Valen by inventorying blankets. On the second, Valen avoided Iona by inspecting a fence already inspected 6 times. On the third, the children noticed. Posey asked whether adults developed seasonal stupidity. Tobin suggested the kings might be permanent. Nall moved their seats together at supper, then looked wounded when they chose other places. Kel took direct action. She stole one of Valen's gloves and left it on Iona's pillow. Iona returned it through Posey. Kel stole it again. By sunset, the glove had crossed the monastery 5 times. It acquired jam, chalk, and a written note from Noel offering marriage advice for 1 copper coin. The direct review ended at midnight. Valen stood beneath strings of herbs drying across the moonyard. He had changed from court black into a plain white shirt. His crown remained at the lodge. His breathing stone rested in his pocket. Iona entered carrying the glove. Your property has developed a social life, she said. It takes after Tobin's tale. She gave it to him. Their fingers brushed, and both became suddenly interested in the weather. Valen cleared his throat. The review is over. I counted the bells. My treatment is paused. Iona tightened her fingers around the abused glove. I remember. He had delivered declarations before thousands. None had required this much air. Iona Fenn, I want to court you. Not because you helped my wolf. Not because gratitude has confused me. I want you because truth rests when it reaches you. Her expression softened. He told her that the court spoke in polished circles. Every sentence demanded inspection. With her, irritation was irritation, kindness was kindness, and silence did not conceal a knife. You make me feel safe, he finished. I did not know how much I wanted that. Iona looked at the feared king standing bareheaded beneath laundry herbs. He had come to close her school. Now he carried a child's stone and asked instead of commanding. You are still irritating, she warned. I hoped consistency would recommend me. Iona began counting his offenses on her fingers. You move my bowls. You question my soup. You once designed a tail guard large enough to invade a province. The stitching was excellent. She stepped closer. It was. Valen's breath caught. Iona admitted that she wanted him too. She wanted the man who sat beside an abandoned child without demanding conversation. She wanted the king who learned to apologize. She even wanted the suspicious inspector of porridge. That title was informal, he murmured. Your Majesty, may I kiss you before you ruin this? His gold eyes warmed. You may. Iona kissed him. The first touch was careful. Valen's hand settled at her waist, waiting for permission even after her mouth had given it. She leaned closer, and patience gave way to hunger. He kissed like a man discovering that tenderness could be powerful. No court watched. No law required anything. Moonlight silvered the yard, but no silver metal touched them. When they parted, Iona's fingers remained in his hair. Valen looked almost dazed. Was that treatment? No. Should we repeat it for reliable findings? Iona tried and failed to look disapproving. Your research methods are becoming corrupt. I am willing to risk an inquiry. She kissed him again. A copper bell rang from the dormitory window. They looked up. 4 faces and 1 tail vanished behind the curtain. Posy's voice floated into the yard. "We saw nothing!" Her wolf ears rose above the sill. Iona covered her face. Valen, who had survived 12 years of court scandal, began to laugh. The children held a formal inquiry at breakfast. Posy asked whether kissing meant the king would attend more classes. Tobin asked whether his tail should approve courtship. Nall requested the promised copper coin for successful advice. Kel placed Valen's glove beside Iona's bowl and looked satisfied. Iona informed them that private relationships were not school business. 17 children stared at her with united disbelief. Valen buttered his bread. "I believe your statement lacks evidence." She kicked his ankle beneath the table. He smiled into his tea. Their courtship did not transform him into a charming man. It gave his existing awkwardness ambition. He brought Iona flowers on the first morning. They were moon lilies, beautiful and mildly poisonous if eaten. Kel ate 1 petal before Mistress Darren removed the vase. Valen brought a carved hair comb next. Tobin's tail stole it and wore it for an hour. On the 3rd attempt, he brought Iona a cup of hot tea and personally supervised it until she drank. She kissed his cheek. "At last," she said, "a useful royal gift." Valen learned quickly. He also discovered that Iona's treatment voice affected him differently now. When they resumed sessions by mutual agreement, she remained professional inside the moon room. Outside it, he became shameless. "You told me to notice something pleasant," he remarked one evening, "during tomorrow's exercise." Valen continued looking at her. "I am practicing early." His gaze traveled over her face. Iona pointed toward the roof tiles. "Notice those. They are less pleasant. They also require repair." He repaired them before supper and collected his kiss afterward. Their first full week together coincided with Mistress Darren catching a fever. The physician was not seriously ill, but she isolated herself and issued instructions through a closed window. Without her daily visit, Iona inherited medicine checks, kitchen inspections, and 17 sets of morning temperatures. Valen inherited whatever remained after she refused to admit exhaustion. He discovered her asleep over the breakfast ledger before sunrise. 1 cheek rested on a list of porridge portions. Her hand still held a pencil. Valen did not wake her. He reviewed the day's tasks, then recruited the older pupils. By 7, Moonmere had become a government of questionable departments. Posy supervised cups. Nall counted blankets. Tobin managed socks despite an obvious conflict of interest. Kel chose human form because hands improved her authority over toast. Valen cooked porridge. He had commanded field kitchens during war and assumed the skill transferred. Field porridge valued survival above texture. School porridge faced a more demanding population. The first pot could have repaired masonry. He added milk. It became pale masonry. Kel tested the spoon and left it standing upright. Posy recorded the result as a structural achievement. Iona awoke to the smell of scorched oats and organized disaster. She entered the kitchen prepared to seize control. Valen placed a cup of hot tea in her hands and guided her toward a chair. His manner was gentle but not royal. He explained the departments, the temperature list, and the porridge emergency. Then he asked for advice instead of surrendering the entire morning back to her. Iona looked around the room. No child seemed frightened. Nall had counted the same blanket 11 times, but the blanket appeared secure. Tobin wore 4 unmatched socks on his arms. Kel was scraping porridge into shapes suitable for roof repair. The school was functioning badly, cheerfully, and without Iona holding every corner. She drank the tea while it was hot. That small surrender marked her own progress. She had spent years believing that love meant becoming indispensable. Children could not be abandoned if they needed her for everything. A school could not be taken if she alone understood it. The belief had protected Moonmere during its fragile beginning. It now prevented the place from growing beyond her strength. Iona reassigned tasks instead of reclaiming them. She taught Posy how to mark cup shortages. She let Nall count a different stack. She gave Valen a second attempt at porridge under written supervision. The new pot was edible. Tobin requested the first batch for construction. Valen denied the military application. Later that day, a younger pupil developed a fever. The child feared the cooling bath because an old academy had used cold water as punishment. Iona sat beside the tub and described every step. Valen warmed towels by the fire and kept the other pupils occupied outside. He did not enter until the child invited him to carry the water bucket. The fever eased before nightfall. Iona found Valen afterward in the laundry room, folding towels into shapes no cupboard could accept. She corrected one fold, then leaned against him. Their closeness outside treatment felt different. She did not monitor his breath. He did not wait for instruction. His arms settled around her waist because they both wanted it there. Valen kissed her hair and considered the day a success despite the porridge. The following morning, Darren's fever broke. She inspected the kitchen from a safe distance and declared the first pot medically useful as a doorstop. Valen accepted the review with dignity. The week produced another consequence. The children had seen adults share work without one taking command. Posey began asking for help before tasks overwhelmed her. Nall admitted when numbers confused him. Tobin returned 3 socks voluntarily. Iona added moon marks to their charts. Valen found one beside her own name that evening. The note beneath it credited her with sitting down before collapse and permitting the kingdom to survive her cup of tea. He had written it in his unmistakable hand. Iona confronted him beyond the moon room. He maintained that adult progress required visible encouragement. She attempted to look stern. Affection ruined the effort. He kissed the corner of her mouth and escaped before she could assign roof work. At last, Iona understood why the children chased their progress moons. Recognition did not make them dependent. It made difficult change visible. She left her own moon on the wall. Chapter 13. The Girl Inside the Wolf. Kel returned to human form on a Thursday because Nall insulted her handwriting. The argument began during a rainy indoor lesson. Kel wrote on her slate that Nall's carved horse looked like a potato fleeing responsibility. Nall replied that wolves could not judge art because they held chalk in their mouths. Kel dropped the chalk. Her fur rippled. Iona saw the change and moved the other children back. She did not cheer or call attention to it. She asked Kel whether she wanted the screen. The wolf nodded. Valen unfolded a linen privacy screen while Posey fetched the green dress. Everyone knew about it now, though nobody mentioned where it had been hidden. Behind the screen, bones shifted with soft cracks. Kel whimpered. Iona sat near the opening and described the rain against the roof. Your clothes are here, she said. You decide whether to continue. A small human hand appeared beneath the screen. Iona took it. Kel emerged several minutes later as a thin 9-year-old girl with tangled copper hair. The green dress hung from narrow shoulders. Her amber eyes remained exactly the same. Nobody moved until she did. Kel looked at Nall's wooden horse. Her voice came rusty from disuse. It still looks like a potato. The classroom erupted. Nall hugged her while insisting the horse was abstract. Posey cried into Kel's sleeve. Tobin's tail brought the chalk back and placed it at her feet. Valen looked toward Iona. Tears shone in her eyes, but she was laughing. Kel remained human through lunch. She used a spoon, complained that shoes were prisons for toes, and discovered that 3 months of fur had not improved her tolerance for cold chairs. Before afternoon rest, she asked whether she could become a wolf again. Iona answered yes, without hesitation. Master Orsic would have called that regression. Iona called it ownership. Kel shifted in the moon room with the green dress folded nearby. The change came easily now that both directions belonged to her. That evening, she returned human again for pudding. Excellent priorities, Valen told her. Kel pointed her spoon at him. You are still in beginner class. I have a gold moon. Posey has 9. The king accepted his rank. Kel's success altered his next session. Valen entered the moon room without gloves or a knife. Iona waited near the wall, no longer directing every step. He wanted a full transformation. She asked why tonight. Because I am ready. Iona watched his shoulders, hands, and breathing. That sounds like your answer. It does not sound like your body. Valen exhaled. Because Kel did it. There is the dangerous answer. He paced once beneath the open roof. A month ago, correction had felt like challenge. Now it felt like a railing beside uncertain stairs. I want to know whether I can, he admitted. You can begin. You do not owe the night an ending. Valen lowered the breathing stone before him. It had developed a pale line from years of water, resembling a crooked smile. He called his wolf. Heat entered his spine. His eyes changed, then his hands. Fur spread over his arms. The old tower rose at the edge of memory, but the moon room remained around it. Iona named what was present. Cool air, warm boards, an open door, her steady breathing. Valen's shoulders widened. Pain flashed through his bones, remembered but not real. He almost stopped. Your choice, Iona reminded him. He chose one more breath. His jaw changed. The world sharpened into scent and sound. Fear became enormous, then moved through him without finding a wound. A black wolf stood beneath the moon. He was larger than any wolf Iona had treated. His coat held a faint brown sheen, and his gold eyes remained fixed on her. For one terrible instant, he expected chains, commands, and triumph. Iona settled onto the boards. Hello, she whispered. That was all. Valen's wolf approached. Each step tested the absence of danger. He sniffed the clay paw, sneezed at its poor quality, and pressed his head against Iona's shoulder. She buried both hands in his fur. You did not need pain, she murmured. The wolf made a sound low in his chest. Do not become proud. Your sculpture remains terrible. He licked her entire cheek. Iona sputtered. That is not an approved therapeutic response. Valen shifted back, laughing, which made the final change awkward. He landed on one knee, human and unclothed behind the waiting screen. Iona handed him a blanket without looking directly at him. You watched a 7-year-old grow a tail for 4 weeks, he noted. Surely anatomy no longer troubles you. 7-year-olds do not flirt while naked. His amusement became audible behind the screen. A regrettable limit in their education. She threw his trousers over the screen. When he emerged dressed, the humor left his face. The magnitude of what had happened reached him slowly. 26 years of secrecy had not ended, but its power had. Valen sat beside the breathing stone and covered his eyes. Iona knelt before him. This time, she did not use her treatment voice. She simply opened her arms. He entered them without shame. Later, after tears neither mentioned and tea neither drank, Valen kissed her against the moonroom door. Reliable findings? She whispered. No, entirely personal. Approval warmed Iona's face. Good answer. Her next kiss answered him more clearly. Chapter 14. A Very Generous Trap. The official offer arrived 6 days later in a carriage containing 3 lawyers and no cushions. Valen read the documents in the refectory. The council would recognize the school immediately as the Royal Moonmere Remedial Ward. It would provide winter funds, repair the roof, and guarantee every current pupil a place. The school would become a crown institution under the king's direct protection. Iona finished reading and placed the parchment on the table. No, the senior lawyer blinked. He had traveled 200 miles and used the word generous 17 times. Valen dismissed the delegation for lunch. The lawyers left carrying the stunned expressions of men who had discovered refusal outside legal theory. Once they were alone, he asked what she objected to. Iona tapped the second page. The charter existed only as a personal royal exemption. A future ruler could withdraw it. No other special school could apply under the same rules. The children would become wards of a royal remedial institution. Remedial means they are behind, she said. Behind whom? It is administrative language. Iona tapped the offensive word. Children live inside administrative language. Valen paced beside the empty hearth. He had negotiated every protection the council would accept without debate. The roof would be repaired before winter. Tobin and Kell could complete their adoptions. 17 children would be safe. A permanent category may take months, he argued. This solves the immediate danger. It hides us beneath your cloak. Valen resisted the accusation in her image. My cloak is presently the strongest protection available. Iona's jaw tightened. And when you are gone? The words struck a place neither had discussed. Kings could die in wars, accidents, or beds like anyone else. Love did not make institutions immortal. Valen softened his tone. Accept this now. We can pursue wider reform later. Later is where governments store promises they dislike. Principals will not keep 17 children housed when the provisional order expires. Iona's answer came without hesitation. Power will not make them safe if their right to exist depends on loving the correct king. The argument stopped between them. Valen heard something beneath her refusal. You do not trust me. Iona flinched. I trust you with my school. That is why I expect you to build more than a favor. It should have comforted him. Instead, exhaustion sharpened every edge. You expect me to risk the school, the guardianships, and my political standing without knowing the council will move. I expect you not to call dependence security. They separated angry. Neither ended the relationship. Neither used the children as messengers. They ate supper at opposite ends of the table and behaved with such careful courtesy that all 17 pupils became alarmed. Posey's ears remained visible through dessert. Tobin whispered that politeness was how adults prepared murder. Nall began hiding sharp spoons. Kell looked from Iona to Valen. Did kissing stop working? Iona nearly inhaled her tea. Valen answered with royal gravity. Kissing remains effective. The participants are temporarily foolish. Which one? Posey asked. Yes, Iona replied. The children accepted this as evidence of continuing affection. That night, Valen returned to his lodge. Iona remained in the school office with the charter documents. Each understood the other's fear. He feared losing practical protection while chasing a perfect law. She feared building a home that survived only through one powerful man's affection. Both fears were reasonable. Reasonable fears could still produce foolish choices. Valen drafted a decree accepting the royal charter. He stared at the seal space for an hour and did not sign. Iona drafted a refusal. She pictured the east roof under winter snow and did not send it. At dawn, Tobin found them separately. He asked Valen whether the new license meant the school belonged to the king. Valen explained that it would receive royal protection. Like your crown? Tobin asked, in a manner of speaking. The boy considered. Kell stole that. Meanwhile, Kell asked Iona whether refusing money meant the roof would continue dripping onto her bed. Iona admitted that it might. Kell frowned. That sounds like adult pride with rain. By breakfast, both adults had been corrected by their dependents. Valen met Iona beneath the pear tree. Neither apologized immediately. He proposed a temporary grant with no ownership, remedial title, or authority over lessons. It would provide 6 months of housing funds, while the Education Council considered a general category. Iona countered with independent inspections, published safety standards, and applications open to any qualified center. The council will hate it, Valen warned. Then we have achieved educational consistency. He smiled despite himself. Iona stepped closer. I was wrong to treat every royal solution as a hidden chain. I was wrong to call speed the same thing as safety. Valen touched her cheek. Are we still temporarily foolish? Almost certainly. Can kissing assist? Iona stepped into his reach. The evidence is promising. Their reconciliation lasted until the goat ate the corner of the royal proposal. Valen watched the animal chewing his compromise. Is that creature politically opposed to me? Iona rescued the remaining pages. It prefers shorter laws. Chapter 15. The King's Second Beginner Examination. The licensing hearing took place at Moonmere because Iona refused to transport 17 anxious children into a council chamber. The 9 counselors arrived in dark carriages with clerks, seals, and expectations of proper furniture. The refectory had one adult chair. Lady Sabre received it because she carried the largest document box. Everyone else sat on children's stools or floor cushions. Lord Bracken, chairman of the Education Council, occupied Valen's former beginner cushion. The red closure ribbon still decorated it. He did not notice until Posey welcomed him to the advanced sitting class. Valen sat beside Iona at the long table. They did not touch, but the space between their hands felt deliberate. The hearing began with law. The school possessed a sanctuary permit, followed every health requirement, and had applied repeatedly for recognition. It lacked only a category that did not exist. Master Orsic argued that creating one would encourage untrained people to open imitation schools. Iona agreed. His triumph lasted 2 seconds. She added that their proposed standards required background checks, physician inspections, guardian consent, safe facilities, and progress records. They also banned pain, silver, and forced alpha pressure. Lady Sabra distributed copies. The counselors had expected emotion. Iona gave them evidence. Mistress Darren testified that the school had recorded no serious training injury in 5 years. Parents described children sleeping through moon nights, returning to family meals, and controlling partial shifts. Nall's mother presented the crooked wooden horse. Nall transformed both hands, held the carving, then returned them by choice. Lord Bracken asked whether the horse had legal relevance. Nall replied that it had more relevance than his chair. The hearing paused while 3 counselors recovered. Posey did not perform a full shift. She showed her progress chart and explained why she had canceled the public test. Her ears appeared while she spoke, revealing fear. She continued anyway. Mistress Fenn did not make me prove I deserved my bed, she said. That helped me become a wolf when I was ready. Tobin demonstrated voluntary tail control. His tail appeared, selected a blue cloth, and returned beneath his tunic. Then it reappeared and swept Lord Bracken's papers onto the floor. That was not voluntary, Tobin admitted. Honesty is also progress, Iona noted. Kell testified in human form. She read from her slate because speaking before 9 strangers felt difficult. I was never trapped in my wolf. I was hiding from people who thought fear was disobedience. No counselor interrupted. The evidence established that the school worked. It did not settle whether the Education Council would recognize an entirely new field. Lord Bracken proposed the royal exemption again. It protected present children without committing the kingdom to untested expansion. Valen could have accepted. He could have ordered the council to reconsider later. He could have kept his secret and still saved Moonmere. His attention moved to the progress wall. His gold paper moon remained beside the children's names. Iona had offered to remove it before the hearing. Valen had refused, without explaining why. Now he understood. If he hid his place on that wall, he would preserve the same shame that had kept him alone for 26 years. Valen stood. The room changed around him. Counselors straightened. Clerks lifted their pens. Children looked up from their cushions. The school has produced evidence that its methods work, he began. The council may still believe these methods serve only weak or defective wolves. Iona's eyes fixed on him. She knew where the words were going. He had not warned her because the choice was not hers to permit or prevent. I arrived intending to close this school, Valen continued. I remained because I needed it. Shock moved through the adults. He revealed only what belonged to him. He did not name the dead instructor. He did not describe every night in the tower. He simply explained that since childhood, he had completed full transformations only through pain, injury, or immediate danger. No physician had known. No minister had known. Until that moment, only Iona had carried the truth with him. Moonmere taught me to begin without pain, he said. More importantly, it taught me that stopping safely is control, not failure. Lord Bracken looked stricken. Your Majesty, questions of royal fitness may arise. Then ask them accurately. Valen removed his right glove. He placed Posey's breathing stone on the table and rested one finger against it. He did not produce a full wolf for spectacle. He called one claw. The dark nail lengthened in complete silence. Valen held it for 2 breaths, then released it. His human hand remained steady. I began, he said. I stopped. No one was endangered. Which part makes me unfit to govern? The council's legal clerk opened the succession code. It defined unfitness as lasting inability to reason, command, or defend the realm. Valen's 12-year reign answered all 3 requirements. The disclosure might feed gossip. It provided no legal ground to remove him. Posey quietly placed a pink moon sticker on his sleeve. The solemnity cracked. Lord Bracken stared at the sticker. Valen left it there. Lady Sabra moved that the council establish a new charter class for voluntary transformation learning centers. Applicants would follow the standards Iona had submitted. Schools could receive grants without becoming crown property. The motion passed 6 votes to 3. Master Orsic immediately requested time for the Royal Moon Tower to revise its methods. Lady Sabra adopted Iona's proposed 6-month correction period. Pain tools and forced pressure ended immediately under the new standards. You cannot direct my academy, he protested. No, she replied. The new standards can. Valen watched admiration replace every other thought in his mind. After the council departed, the children renamed the hearing the king's 2nd beginner examination. Valen received passing marks in honesty, claw control, and tolerating small chairs. He failed crown management because Kell stole it again. Chapter 16. Wolves who needed more time. Winter arrived after the roof was repaired, which deprived the weather of an excellent joke. Moonmere received the kingdom's first special transformation learning charter. Its official name required 23 words, 3 seals, and a board too wide for the front gate. The children made a smaller sign. School for wolves who need more time. Iona hung it above the door. Over the following months, every child in the original class completed a safe, voluntary full transformation. Some needed weeks. Others needed most of the winter. Nobody received a deadline, and nobody earned more love by finishing sooner. Fen became a gray wolf with an unfortunate interest in spoons. Nall's paws were enormous. Posey's ears remained capable of hearing gossip from neighboring counties. Tobin transformed last. His tawny wolf landed in the training yard, looked at his own tail, and chased it in 6 triumphant circles. He returned human only after becoming dizzy and colliding with Valen's legs. It still lacks discipline, Tobin announced from the grass. Valen helped him sit up. It has excellent commitment. Kell shifted between forms whenever she chose. She preferred wolf shape for rainy mornings, human hands for drawing, and either form for stealing the king's gloves. The district court approved Iona's permanent adoption of Tobin and Kell. Valen attended as her partner, not as the judge. Iona remained their legal parent. He signed as household sponsor and designated emergency guardian. He had moved neither the children nor Iona into the palace. Instead, he divided his weeks between the capital and Moonmere. The Forester's Lodge gained a 2nd desk, a better roof, and a pantry latch Kell still defeated. The school remained Iona's work. Valen supported it, argued for its funding, and read bedtime stories with unacceptable violence removed. His relationship with his wolf continued to change. Some transformations remained difficult. None required a wound. On hard nights, he used the stone, the open door, and Iona's steady voice. He no longer hid every struggle. He also did not make it public property. Honesty, Iona reminded the kingdom, did not eliminate privacy. Their courtship became less secret and more inconvenient. Council meetings ended with Valen carrying roof supplies in royal carriages. Iona received official invitations addressed to Mistress Fen and returned corrections whenever someone called her a royal dependent. At school, she still treated him with 2 faces. During a difficult moon exercise, her voice remained soft. Feel the boards beneath your feet. You decide whether to continue. Valen produced both claws, held them calmly, and returned his hands. Well done, she whispered. The moment they left the room, she handed him a broken stool. Fix this before supper. I have just completed advanced training. Then the hammer should fear you. He took the stool. Do advanced students receive kisses? Only after competent joinery. Valen repaired it perfectly. That evening, the original class gathered beneath the new sign. Spring air smelled of wet grass, bread, and the apple trees beginning to bloom. 17 young wolves crowded the yard in coats of brown, gray, gold, black, and russet. Iona stood beside Valen while Tobin attempted to organize a group howl. Posey objected that he had no musical authority. Kel stole the conducting stick. The howl began badly and became worse. Valen leaned toward Iona. I completed a painless shift, changed national law, and repaired a stool. Surely that earns the highest moon mark. She considered him with exaggerated seriousness. The stool wobbles. It does not. A king should respect expert judgment. Valen inclined his head with false humility. May I appeal? Briefly. Valen kissed her beneath the sign while 17 wolves produced the least dignified howl in the kingdom. When he lifted his head, Iona placed a gold paper moon directly over his mouth. His eyes narrowed with amusement. The kiss was personal, she told him. The sticker is for finally following instructions. Behind them, Tobin's tail stole the remaining sheet of moons. This time, nobody tried to stop it. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romance Tales. I hope this story brought you a little laughter, warmth, and a peaceful moment in a world that can sometimes feel heavy. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and share it to spread more happiness. I'll see you in the next one.